This is a special Veterans Day presentation. Local 3's Salute to Veterans, honoring our local heroes.
Good evening and welcome to our special Local 3 presentation, A Salute to Veterans. I'm Rebecca Bartlemay. We are in the new UP Military Museum, which is located in the multi-complex building of the UP State Fairgrounds in Escanaba. Tonight we'll share the stories of many men and women and contributions the Upper Peninsula has made to war efforts, which is exactly what this museum is all about. We'll start with a group of women who made a significant impact to World War II, but their efforts were not recognized until many years later.
The WASP, the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, was put together in 1942, 41 and 42 to move goods and services across the country, stateside, while it freed our pilots in the military up for missions overseas.
And Jausma Miller, the curator of the UP Military Museum, says these women went above and beyond their role.
These women test flew all planes coming out of the factories. They were tow target squadrons, and they would fly the planes that had the canvas banner out the back for the people on the ground to practice shooting at with live ammunition. These women logged 60 million air miles.
Out of the 1,074 women who served as a WASP, 4 of them were from the Upper Peninsula. They are Arlene Hayes of Ishpeming.
As a young woman, she qualified for the WASP program. Interesting though, she was only 5 foot and she needed to be 5'2", so she really had to do some strenuous exercises in order to pass and become a WASP. And her wedding dress was made from a parachute.
Mary Kuhn Walters of Baraga.
She performed every diligent duty that there was.
Catherine Landry Steele of Marquette.
Caddy, as she was known as, was one of the first women selected out of the first 25 for the tow target squadron. She flew those planes that were shot at with live ammunition for practice from the ground crew.
And Nancy Harkness Love of Houghton.
She got her pilot's license at the age of 16 and her commercial license by the time she was 20. She was the one that put together the Women's Air Force Squadron. That was then incorporated into the WASP program. She qualified in every available military aircraft. Of the 1,074 young women in the WASP program, there were 2 squadron commanders, Jackie Cochran and Nancy Harkness Love. To think that we had a squadron commander for this program from the Upper Peninsula, to me, is a great honor.
But it wasn't easy being a woman in this role. They were under the same regulations as the men in this role and paid $100 less every month. They were not recognized as military with no honorable discharge or benefits.
When they lost one of the girls, the government would not ship their remains home or pay for their funeral, because they were never considered military.
It wasn't until 1977 that legislation was introduced to allow these women an honorable discharge and military benefits. That legislation was signed in 1978, and it wasn't until 2009 that they were able to receive a gold medal of honor. Many of these women had already passed away before they got the recognition they deserved.
Arlene Hayes, Catherine Landry Steele, Mary Kuhn Walters, were all alive in 1978, and they passed away in their 80s. But not Nancy. She died 3 years before, actually 2, in 1976. At the age of 67, she passed away from cancer, so she did not receive. And a lot of her awards came posthumously. You know, and as you do this research, Rebecca, it's just amazing what we find that the Upper Peninsula has contributed that people just are not aware of.
And just like Ann said, the UP has been a part of the war efforts in so many different ways. This wall behind me depicts the role the indigenous community has played throughout the history of American war. When the Upper Peninsula Military Museum was established, Ann Josma Miller says she was determined to find a way to pay tribute to Indigenous people from the UP who had served in all aspects of war.
I couldn't do this alone. I didn't have that history. But Mary Panay took on this challenge, and she did a remarkable job of research and design of this beautiful wall.
The history on this wall dates all the way back to the Civil War.
During the Civil War, sharpshooters, Company K, 144 men from Michigan, were called upon to help the Union. 9 of them were from the Upper Peninsula. 7 men, 2 from the UP, died at Andersonville in one of the worst POW camps in Georgia. Several years later, several delegates, even from the Upper Peninsula, traveled to Georgia to recognize and to bury properly these young men. 2 of them were from St. Ignace that died at Andersonville. In the Civil War, World War I, highest capacity per ethnic group served from the Native American tribes in World War I. 10,000 Native women served in the Red Cross.
These people weren't recognized as U.S. citizens until 1924, years after the Civil War and World War I.
And they had fought all during the Civil War and World War I without that type of acknowledgement.
Fast forward to today, and Josma Miller says there have been many contributions over the years in different ways.
Every tribe in the Upper Peninsula contributed documentation or finances in order to do this wall.
When we come back, the story of an aircraft that mysteriously disappeared in World War II, where one of the crew members was from the UP. Welcome back to A Salute to Veterans. Did you know that there's part of a World War II plane in the Copper Country? Well, Local 3's Brianna McLean shares the story behind it.
Outside of the Lake Linden Village Hall and Fire Station is one of the propellers from Lady Be Good, a B-24 Liberator plane used during World War II. And the tragic story behind this piece of metal was not only a mystery for years, but it also took the lives of 9 men, including 1 man from Lake Linden. On April 4th, 1943, U.S. Air Force Technical Sergeant Robert E. Lamont and 8 other members of the 514th Squadron took off from an airstrip near Benghazi, Libya. This would be Lady Be Good's first and final mission.
What happened was they went to go bomb Naples, Italy during the war. They flew across the Mediterranean Sea, and just as they took off, a large sandstorm ensued that would last over 8 hours. 8 of the aircraft turned back because the weather got so bad, but the Lady Be Good wanted to go on. Being their very first mission, they wanted to do their very best. So they flew on to the target, and they were one of 2 airplanes that actually bombed the target in Naples, Italy. What they didn't realize is that there was a tremendous tailwind, because as they turned around and came back, darkness fell upon them. They flew, and they lost their what they call their radio detection finder. So as they started flying home, what they didn't realize is as they flew across the Mediterranean at night, they had actually crossed over the coast. They didn't know exactly where they were. They flew for 2 hours past their base into the middle of the Sahara Desert. And as they began to run out of fuel, they still believed they were over the water. The pilot ordered the men to bail out. And when they bailed out then, what they didn't realize is that Lady Be Good would continue to fly. She actually flew for another 16 miles on one engine, and she landed belly up in the sand.
Lady Be Good flew 400 miles past its base. The crew, however, never made it back to the aircraft. They walked 85 miles from where they landed after parachuting out of Lady Be Good. All men perished in the middle of the desert. For 16 years, Lady Be Good and its crew was thought to have been lost at sea. Until 1959, when British geologists working for Darcy Oil Company located the plane crash site. By 1960, 8 of the 9 men's remains were found in the Sahara Desert, including Lamont's. The mystery of Lady Be Good was no longer a mystery, and her men were finally able to be laid to rest. With a salute to veterans in Lake Linden, I'm Brianna McLean.
After the break, we'll hear the story of one UP man who lost his life in the Korean War. Just south of here in Menominee County lies a stretch of highway that was recently dedicated to a Yooper who served in the Korean War. Local 3's Melissa Venix shares Sam Costello's story.
On October 28th, a new sign went up along US 41 in Daggett. From this spot here, all the way to Menominee, the highway is now the Samuel R. Costello Memorial Highway.
His nephews, Michael Costello and Jeff Lamont, learned about their uncle through one of his friends.
He went on and on and on about Sam was just loved by everything. He was, class officers, and just everybody liked him from both sides of the track.
Sam had only been out of high school for 2 years when he lost his life.
He was a Menominee High School athlete. We found his major M. He attended Wolverine Boys State, and we found his beanie cap that they gave him in 1948 when he went, which was what we understand that was from the Legion, and that was quite the honor to be accepted into this at that time.
Costello and Lamont found letters from Sam. Reading the letters, both said they felt they were getting to know him.
One of his letters talked about when he does get out of the service, he wanted to possibly come back to become an athletic director. He wanted to get into teaching because he loved sports so much. He was pretty much a star athlete. Football center, linebacker. He was a big boy.
When Sam was listed as missing and later as having been killed, letters came from his fellow servicemen.
This is a letter from a gentleman. This is that letter you're talking about, Jeff, from Al Hall.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at one of the paragraphs. Yes, I believe I knew Sam better than anyone else, and he became as much a part of me as my right arm. Christmas Day, I was reading the Stars and Stripes, and I came across an item listing the names of persons missing in the C-54 crash. I started to pass it, but something pulled me back to it. I read through it. I came across Sam's name. That was Christmas. That was my Christmas present. And part of me died then. The paper listed the men as missing. I never gave up hope.
Sam died in a plane crash while traveling between Okinawa, Japan, and the Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. The plane hit Mount Tabayak in the Philippines, leaving no survivors.
It took over a year and a half, or close to 2 years, before the bodies were recovered. This was at 13,000 feet or something like that in a very remote area of the Philippines. And so his body, it took, quite a while to retrieve the remains.
When Sam's body was brought back to Menominee, Lamont and Costello says a lot of his former classmates were waiting for his train and that some were the pallbearers at Sam's funeral. With a salute to veterans in Menominee, I'm Melissa Venix.
That stretch of road was chosen because Sam's mother died in a car accident there in 1939. Still to come tonight on the Salute to Veterans, details on an organization that connects veterans. There are thousands of veterans in the Upper Peninsula. After they return home, some of them need some help from their neighbors. Ben Raymond shows us how one organization is getting these vets connected.
If you see a veteran or you know a veteran, express some appreciation, maybe give them a little bit of leeway.
Andrew Beck is a Marine Corps veteran.
We will talk with you, just get information about your background, what are the needs that you have right now.
Gail Maurer is a disability advocate for health and wellness with SAIL.
That they opened up a little bit and kind of took us into their arms and started a veterans program.
Together, they are helping UP veterans find their place after service.
But part of SPAR is we have this UP Vet Served program, and that's for our veterans, and they don't necessarily have to identify with a disability, but it's again to just support our veterans so that they have opportunities for camaraderie, for learning, for supporting each other. That's what the UP Vet Served program has been all about.
They provide resources and a sense of community.
Like when you look over at your friend and he's on a dog sled, and you're on a dog sled, and you're mushing through the woods in McMillan at 15 miles an hour, just to look over and see another veteran and have that moment of connection. Isn't this great?
It's a mission of gratitude for veterans and their families.
The understanding of each other that, someone who has not been a veteran may not understand.
Making sure our veterans know they aren't alone. With a salute to veterans, I'm Ben Raymond.
Stay tuned as we'll tell you about one Upper Michigan family where serving our country is a tradition. Joining the military is an act of service, but for one Upper Peninsula family, it's also about tradition.
I just always knew I was going to be in the Marine Corps. Just wanted to be in the Marine Corps ever since I was like, I don't know, 6, 7 years old.
I knew he was joining, but day after graduation, I took off of work so I could spend the day with him. 8 o'clock that morning, there's the recruiter picking him up, and I just bawled.
I ran into the guy's recruiter. He asked me if I wanted to join the Marine Corps, and I had no excuse to say no, so I said yes.
Uncle Mike was my biggest influence growing up. I wanted to be just like him, so at 5 years old, I decided I was joining the Marine Corps.
It was just family tradition. That's pretty much keep the line going for us.
I didn't even ask. I just said, sounds good.
It's still hard, you know, you still cried at night because you missed them, you know, but it was hard. And then when I watched these boys come home, it made it worse because they had PTSD really bad.
You can go out in town and, I don't know, you're kind of nervous, kind of worried, but shouldn't be.
It's hard to watch your family. There's a part of them that might never heal.
You got to get your grips a little bit again, just get familiar with everybody. It's definitely a relief to see all your family and friends, though.
If they had a problem, they would call their Uncle Mike, you know. And if they needed something, they call their Uncle Mike.
To choose the Marines, you know, from high school, you know, from a small town, is scary. You know I've done it, and I am so very proud that they chose to do that.
I just wanted to be the best, and a couple of my teachers basically said I wouldn't make it in the Marine Corps, and so I had to prove them wrong.
But it'll be a while now. The rest of the kids are pretty young.
Thank you for watching A Salute to Veterans. For those who have served, are serving, or are the family and friends of our country's heroes, thank you for your dedication and sacrifice. For Local 3 News, I'm Rebecca Bartlemay. Have a good evening.